Hi folks, my name is Mr. Kuchak and I am your art teacher. Before we begin, let me go over our class rules. We have 3 rules at Elk Lake. Be ready, be responsible, be respectful. We are ready in the art room when we come in, sit in our assigned seats, and get quiet so that we can learn about art. We are responsible in the art room when we follow directions and take care of our supplies, and we clean up any of our messes. We are respectful when we use kind words like please and thank you, and when we value other students' artwork. Supplies you will need for today's lesson. Go ahead and pause the video if you need to. Hi folks, today we are going to be working on our 3rd art element. So far we've talked about lines, we've talked about shapes. So now we're going to start moving on to value. Value is the difference between white and black, so it's all the grays that are in between. Value is used a lot for shading. It's used to make things look 3-dimensional. So with the value that we go over today, we're going to be able to use the value when we do our 3D shapes, or called forms. So that will be another art element that we cover in the next lesson. But today I do want to go over a little bit more with value. I'm going to move my camera down so that you can see what I'm talking about, so that you can see some examples of what we would call a value scale and how you can make a simple one. And then we're going to actually make a value scale onto our drawing so that we have that for the next lesson. If you haven't done the lines lessons or the shape lesson, please go do those first so that you have your paper set up the right way to do this. So this is lesson number 3, and let me move my camera. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so with value, you want to think of value as not like an elevator shaft where we go right from white to black, where it's one huge step down. Instead, think of it as like your cellar steps. So maybe you have a light bulb at the top of the steps, and when you turn it on, it's really bright and white there. And then as you step down the steps, it gets a little bit darker, a little bit darker, a little bit darker, a little bit darker, until it's really dark down at the bottom. And that's what we're after. We're after these gradual steps down. Now, one way that you can do a value scale is by drawing out some boxes and then using your pencil to color it in. The whole trick with the value scale, though, is don't smear it. So don't take your fingers and smear, 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 because then you're just getting, it's almost like you're all getting like the number 3. So by a number 3, what I mean is we number the boxes. So 1 would be pressing very light with our pencil, and number 6 would be pressing as dark as we can. So let me show you a quick little example here. Here I have 6 little boxes, and if I press with the side of my pencil as hard as I can press, and this one we're using pressure. So pressure is a smooth way to do texture. It must go from one side to the other, filling in the entire box. You don't want any white showing through. So that is what we would call a number 6. It's as dark as we can make it with this pencil. Every pencil is going to be a little different. If your pencil says 2HB, it's going to have a little bit more clay than graphite. If your pencil says 6B, it's going to have a lot of graphite and just a teeny tiny little bit of clay in it. So HB, H pencils, and F pencils have a little bit more clay than graphite in them. Those drawing pencils don't smear as well, but they're great for like fine tipped lines and things like that. Your B pencils normally have a little bit more graphite than clay, and those are great for shading. So things like 2B, 3B, 4B, 5B, sometimes you'll see sets of those. That's what they mean. They're just a little bit softer pencil. So here, I'm just gonna go back and forth, and I'm pressing lightly, and this will then be my lightest value. So that's my super light value. My next one, I'm going to try to make just a little bit darker. So it's just like you're adding it up a tiny little bit. And you might be able to see that it gets just a little bit darker gradually. We don't want streaks in here. So we don't want something like this where we're just kind of smearing through there and, oh, look at, it's filled in all the way, but it's not. You have all this white paper. The more white paper showing, the lighter your value will look, because the white kind of blends it out, like makes it a little bit more gray. So that one's going to be a little bit more, and then this one's going to be a little bit more than that one. That way I have those gradual steps inside there. And what I like to do is I just kind of squint my eye a little bit to look through to see if that gets a little bit darker, and it does. So that's my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 values. Now you can do different values. You can do different ways of doing your value. You could do something like cross hatching, where you're doing lines. So your lines would come up, would go across, you would go diagonal, you would go back diagonally the other way. And a lot of the times you'll see artists do that with pen and ink. So they'll use an ink pen or even a Sharpie to fill things in. Sometimes you see that a lot in comic books. The last one that we really have is pointillism, which is the dots. So you can actually use dots to fill something in too. But today we're just going to focus in on the pressure, using the side of the pencil and not smearing it. If we have all this value and we smear it with our hand, it all becomes kind of like a number 2 or number 3 in our picture. So we want to avoid those, having the whole thing look the same. We want these gradual steps. So one that I found online, it was showing how to do a sphere in value, and there's tiny little steps. So this would be the white, and then you would have number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then as dark as you possibly could at the bottom. And that helps make it look three-dimensional. Once again, here's their value scale. So they go from white to black, and there's all their steps in between. So what we're going to do in our picture here is we are going to divide our next box up here into 6 spots. So we need 5 different lines. So we're going to do 1, 2, and then I'm going to come way down here to make sure that I don't have a teeny tiny sliver. 3, 4, 5. So 5 boxes, and we can count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that will give me my 6 steps. So step 1, that's going to be very lightly, as light as you can press. And that's going to go from one side of the paper to the other. You want to fill in the entire box. Don't have it streaky. You want it to look nice and soft, and you want to use your pencil to do this. So use your pencil, get it in there nice and smooth. Then go to your next one. Click pencils don't work too well with these. They seem to break because you're using the sides. So a regular pencil is going to work a lot better. So let's get this in there. Now when I squint my eye, I can see it looks almost the same. So if it looks almost the same, then you need it just a little bit darker, and so you just press a little bit harder. What I try to do is I try to rest my hand here on the table as I'm smearing, so that the whole pencil is not resting on the paper. If I have the whole pencil there, it's going to come out dark. But if I rest my hand, I can control then how hard I'm pressing by how I hold the pencil. So now I'm going to come right in here, and I'm going right up next to the side. I'm not going over out of the box. I'm just trying to fill in that area the best that I can. Back and forth, trying to avoid the letters so that I have that in there. Good, that's starting to get darker. Now, this last one here, I know that's going to be the darkest that I'm going to do, so I'm going to get into that one right now so that I can get in there. And I know how dark I need to get to. There we go. This one sometimes takes a little bit because the paper has a little bit of a crease in there, or there's something in there, and you just have to kind of go back and forth until you really get it filled in. So it should look really, really dark in there. And then I can just back off a tiny little bit. You want to check your pencil point too. If it gets really sharp, sometimes it'll leave a little streak in there. So in between in between these, I like to just kind of rotate the pencil a little bit so that I don't get a really sharp point. Or if I do get a sharp point, I'll just knock it off a little bit so that it's not scratching through the paper. Now this one, if I look at it, it's a little bit lighter than the last two. So it's a little bit darker. So this one needs a little bit more pencil lead in it. And then this one here should be a little bit darker because it's right there, that number 5. So then squint your eye and see if any spots really jump out at you. If you missed a spot, maybe you have to go back in with it, or you have to go right up next to that letter a little bit more to kind of get those spots filled in. And that's what we want to do. And it should look like it kind of flows so that it's going from dark all the way down to light. And that's what we're after for our value. So once again, value is the difference between white and black. It also lets us do things three-dimensionally. So it'll let us shade. There's a lot of great value scales out there that you can take a look at. There's different ways that you can make value scales. This was on about.com when I typed in value scales and things like that. And it starts off with white and black, and then you use half and half, and then you kind of keep going through there. So this one would be great for painting. So if you have your white and black paint, and then you mix half and half, you can get that, and then you kind of keep going, and you can actually paint out a value scale pretty easily with that. This is pretty much how people make other colors. So, pink isn't its own color, it's just red with white added to it. And you can go through and make red all the way up to scarlet through there by adding different values to it. And you can do that with each and every color. So I hope that went pretty smooth for you. The next one that we're going to do is forms. Forms are three-dimensional shapes, and we're also going to use our value on there to make them look three-dimensional. So I hope you have a good night. Thank you very much.